Time is a funny thing. Time is a peculiar thing. You see, when you're young, you're a kid, you got time. You got nothing but time. Throw away a couple years here, a couple years there, doesn't matter. You know, the older you get, you say, Jesus, how much I got? I got 35 summers left. Think about that. 35 summers. That is, of course, Tom Waits as Benny in Francis Ford Coppola's 1983 Rumblefish. A classic that I was recently introduced to. And in a roundabout way, I am going to kind of work it into the hobby and a video I watched this past week. So I just got done watching Adam's new opinion video, Adam from Tabletop Minions, and it got me thinking about my own opinions when it comes to this hobby, and specifically about how I don't feel like I have strong opinions in a lot of ways. I would say it's almost not worth having strong opinions in the hobby. The hobby is perpetually like evolving thing, you know, and something that is constantly changing right along with the hobby is you know, and me, all of us, we're all changing, you know. I, for example, when I first got into it, you know, when I initially was into Warhammer, I was too young and I couldn't afford it, and so that was like 3rd edition. So now when I got into it, it was around about 9th edition, Primaris just came out, and I was all about the new goodness. But as I've enjoyed the hobby further, and I've spent time with all the stuff, and I've seen older collections, and I've just seen more of the world of what's in the miniature world. You know, I've grown to love like the old stuff and crunchy looking stuff, and I have an appreciation and an enjoyment of those other things that's not just the new. Now, I'm not trying to say to not be passionate about what you're doing or what you're into, but at the end of the day, most hills aren't worth dying on. And most hills don't even matter. What does matter is that you're enjoying what you're enjoying, and it's not hurting you or others. I think there's a reality of like tension and gray in life that oftentimes gets ignored. And I get it, you know, it doesn't sell. That nuance is a lot like tougher of a solution to sell than a single answer that will perfectly do everything. It's easier to live in a reduced conception of reality where everything is simple, like a binary, A or B. But the reality is that that is not reality, and I think we're better off for it. Understanding nuance in the world helps us expand as people and be more empathetic and have a wider skill set, and ultimately I think it makes life more interesting. So, to tie this into the sage words of Mr. Waits playing Mr. Benny and Rumblefish, I would say spend your time wisely. Enjoy it, and don't spend it dying on hills. Spend your years open and enjoying things. These are a few of the thoughts that have just kind of been rattling around my mind this past week. But as I try to contextualize the world, my thoughts through my hobbying, I'm actually getting a lot done. So, as the video title says, this week I finished the trench panel, and to my great pleasure, it came out great. The few weeks before I finished up the panel, I had been working on a commission of some terrain, like scene panels for bolt action. Those ended up being a ton of fun to make, and at the end of the day, like, they looked really fucking cool. You know, especially like when they're all together and you, they flow together like really well. Not to toot my own horn, but toot, because they came out great. Another thing that came with those panels was, you know, just gained confidence and surety for the next steps that I wanted to take with my trench panel. So the final steps for the trench panel were twofold. 1, I needed to texture the panel, and 2, I needed to paint it. To texture the panel, I used the same textured paste I used on those bolt action terrain panels that I made. So with that, I just smear the stuff all around, then I jab at it with a balled up piece of foil to give it like an irregular texture. So, it looks earthy and like the ground. To fill in areas not covered by the paste and to add variation to the texture, I spread around a bit of wood glue and I poured dirt on top. This all got primed, and then I began painting the panel. Now, the paint job was a very simple, like down and dirty paint job. I dry brushed the whole thing like I normally do, just to highlight the terrain, give it some dramatic light and shadow. For the earth on the sides, I did like an acrylic brown, which I watered down a bunch, and this was just to get like some fast coverage and a nice base color for the earth. For the decking of the trench, I wet blended 3 or 4 speed paints to give the wood like more of a naturalness and variation to keep it more interesting than like a straightforward single color of brown. Before my final paint step, I added a bit more texture with the texture paste called Muddy Earth. It's like one of those AK texture pastes. I waited to put this on after some of the painting because it already has, it's really like a nice good looking mud color, and I didn't want to prime over that. For the corrugated metal that lines the sides of the trench, I just kind of like roughly jabbed around with some silver paint to get just a rough coverage. After that, I went over the top with like a watery orange, just like to add some color pop and like a little bit of rustiness. And then I followed that by jabbing around with a dark wash, just to further the variation and distress and griminess. The final step was an all-over dry brushing with an acrylic tan paint. This highlights everything, and it also acts as a filter, muting aspects of the terrain, and it brings it all together in like a cohesive piece. Hot tip right there, that's what I do for like all of my minis. I always end on the dry brushing of the tan. It just, like I said, it's like a filter. It makes everything cohesive, it tames things down, it blends things, and it's still transparent, so you're still seeing all that color. It's not like you're just painting over it. So, dry brush tan when you're done. But just like that, I am done. Literal trash, just cardboard Topo Chico box and a little bit of creativity, and now I have this beautiful, immersive little terrain piece. It doesn't get much better than that. There's definitely a roughness to it, but I'm personally a big fan of that. While I love the immersion of really good looking terrain, I think there's a certain charm to stuff that looks rough and scrappy and handmade, and that you can tell is handmade. Just like with pottery, you've got the maker's mark on it, so to speak. You can tell that it's handmade, and I think that's pretty cool. But hey, what do you think? I think this thing came out pretty good myself. I'm curious though, like, would you go about making a trench this way? How successful do you think it was, or not? Maybe foam is the way you would go. I don't know. I didn't go that route, and that was just purely to not spend money. Let me know down in the comments what you think. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a like, and of course, if you enjoyed the show and want to follow along for more, be sure to subscribe. In the next coming weeks, I'm going to be pressing forward with several painting projects. On the personal side, I've got my 30K Death Guard coming along, and they are beautiful, and having a lot of fun with them. And then my detox and break from painting Space Marines from time to time, I'm also going to be doing my 40K orcs. I started this army maybe like a year and a half ago, and it's just kind of sat like unbuilt, partially built and partially unbuilt. But on Wednesdays, I play 40K with a small group, and one of the friends that comes to the group, he only currently has orcs and only ever plays with orcs. So every time we're over there, the WAAAAGH inevitably gets called. And the house rules are that everyone joins in on the WAAAAGH. That said, I think my brain has been infected with an orky brain fungus, and I am pushing forward with 40K boys. And I am not mad about it. I love them. They're so fun, and I'm super stoked on the one I have painted so far. On the commission side of things, I'm going to be working on a bunch of Imperial Guard. I'm going to be painting them up as the Rowan Deepers. The Rowan Deepers, they're like a scrappy, poorly supplied regiment in the lore, and they have this World War I, II, like British, Australian desert troop kind of vibe going on. So pretty stoked to get that going and kind of figure out the paint scheme and how I'm gonna do it at large. And in terms of future videos as well, I'm gonna be partaking in the Big Bot Bash that Mr. Bill from Bill Making Stuff is putting on. I emailed him to see if I can be a part of the official roster, but either way, I'm gonna go ahead, just do the hashtag and tag along on the craft experience. It ought to be a fun time. I'm excited to make something random that's just like a one-off and doesn't pertain to anything other than participating in making stuff in an interesting collective way. So that is something to look forward to. But that is going to be it for me for now. So I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace. Today is February 17, 2025. Here are 7 dice. Today's numbers are on the D20, 17. On the D12, 11. On the D10, 6. On the percentage die, 60. On the D8, 1. On the D6, 4. And on the D4, 1. Those are today's numbers.